Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Southern Cameroons International Town Hall. And it is our pleasure to welcome once again a person who actually needs no introduction to Africans and Southern Cameroonians. I think a friend to all peace-loving people everywhere, His Excellency Tibor, the former Assistant Secretary of State for Africa. Mr. Ambassador, welcome.
Thank you very, very much for having me. It's a delight to be with this community. You know my feelings.
Yes. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip protocol and skip the formal introductions. Right? We're tight on time, and everybody knows who you are. And if you don't, Wikipedia, right? Take a day or two on Wiki and everything. So welcome. I know the pressing issue at hand these days is the issue of referendum and settling on a common, a common ask through the international community. Something that you frequently were at the receiving end of. So before we probably go into questions or anything, I would like to open the floor up to you if you have any thoughts, comments you want to share broadly.
Sure, and I'll make this very quick because, as I mentioned, I can only stay for about 30 minutes. First of all, my sincere thanks to the Hudson Institute for bringing together a number of Southern Cameroonians with varyingly different points of view, and for the the phenomenal work that they did afterwards in trying to come up with some kind of a joint position. As I've said before, I have absolutely no preferred point of view. My biggest concern is the suffering and abuse of the people in Ambazonia. A couple of comments I will make, though, that unfortunately in many respects the community continues to exercise what I would call a circular firing squad. They seem much more intent on criticizing each other and saying who is a traitor and who's not a traitor just because of their point of view. We have frontline groups, we have umbrella organizations, and the umbrella organizations especially have to represent many points of view. So I think it's very unhelpful when the Southern Cameroonians are going after each other and questioning each other's sincerity as opposed to a common point of unity. Now, you can look around at the world right now, and you can imagine that the United States government, when it comes to Africa, is so focused on what's going on in Sudan. The Assistant Secretary of State is in the region. That's what is taking up all of the time in Washington. And beyond Sudan, there are a couple of other issues, but the point I want to make, and again, I'm the messenger, so don't blame the messenger. And also I want to underline, I do not speak for the US government anymore. I analyze things, but I'm not a government spokesperson. But as a messenger, I have to say that the continued disunity hurts your cause more than anything else. All you have to do is get on the web and put in Ambazonia, and you come up with 4 or 5 different websites for, interim governments that represent Ambazonia. And from the point of view of the US government, that's not serious. And I imagine the people, who run the Cameroon government in Yaoundé really enjoy seeing, that kind of disunity. Another comment I want to make is, again, I know I upset people when I say this, is that for your struggle, it is much more important to look through the windscreen than the rearview mirror. I mean, everybody keeps bringing up, United Nations Resolution 1608. I'm sorry to say, but in many respects, Resolution 1608 is like the golden calf when Moses came off the mountain and the people were worshiping the golden calf. I think the sooner the community can burn that golden calf and move on towards the future, the better, because Resolution 1608 is not going to go anywhere. It's not going to achieve any kind of, independence or anything for Ambazonia. The other thing I you know, I sometimes shake my head is when you get into arguments over things like plebiscites, you know, versus other instruments, that's a wonderful discussion for academicians and for political scientists, but I don't know, you know, how much that's going to mean for what you want to achieve in Southern Cameroon. So I would again urge the same thing I always urge is unity, speaking with one voice as much as possible, and engaging with one voice, because as long as the community engages with different voices, nobody in the US government is going to take you seriously. No one in the international community is going to take you seriously. And you will be having the same discussion in 5 years and 10 years and 20 years. And meanwhile, during that time, the people of Southern Cameroon are going to struggle. So I will shut up and stop here and avidly await, you know, the interests of the people that want to make their points.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. So in the interest of parsimony and time, please just type your questions in the chat, and we'll be picking up questions for Mr. Ambassador as we go ahead. So just type your questions in the chat, and we will be looking through. Now, in your experience, how does it really help facilitate potential peace bringing or resolution of a conflict when we approach the international community with a singular request, with a common request, instead of a myriad of different, even if they are intermediary requests that may lead to the same goal?
Yeah, if you have a single pursuit, let's just say, for argument's sake, that say if the community decides they want to pursue a referendum so the people on the ground can actually have a voice in their future, then you can actually, the community can pool its resources and hire a representative in Washington, like other communities have done, whether it's a Somaliland community or, you know, others seeking justice. And then that professional representative, also known as lobbyists, and normally I don't recommend lobbyists, but in this case, since there is no Ambazonian embassy, you know, to do the work, I would say you might consider one, and then a professional lobbyist can take you, knows exactly what buttons to push in Washington so that the issue gets in front of decision makers, instead of as it is now, when decision makers get 25-page letters from various sides of the Southern Cameroonian community, and those letters go right into the trash can because people don't have time to deal with 25-page letters representing different points of view.
Imran Abu Bakr, you were the one that fucked my mother?
Sorry.
No, it was not me, It was not me. You got the wrong person.
Sorry,
No,
sorry
you
about
fucked
that.
my
Sorry,
mother.
we're just being Zoom.
Stop this. It was not me. Leave
You
me
are the
alone.
one that slept with my mother.
Herman, make me co-admin so I can find some of these people.
You are co-host
You are
already.
the one that
No,
slept with
this
my
tech
mother.
fraud production.
Just a second, let me remove him.
Sorry about that, Mr. Ambassador. You should understand.
No problem. This is technology, my friends.
Yes, I have been removing them as we're talking. I've seen them come in. And,
Yeah, and make production co-host, please.
Yeah, if you make me co-host, Mass, I can help you with those things also. Remove them early.
I guess one of the things is everybody who doesn't put their name, you know, I would ask everybody to rename themselves, please. Those of you that don't have name, please rename yourselves. Because I've just been removing the people that I'm seeing with strange stuff or making strange faces if they have their cameras on. So if you don't have it, I'm gonna take you out.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, no, Edmond, there are some people from Ground Zero who cannot do that. So, unless
somebody, if you're from Ground Zero, probably
those ones we know them. Those ones we know the people from Ground Zero.
Okay, let me get back to the conversation, please. You guys can be doing that behind the scenes. We have a question from Mr. Tebke. Why is the Western world not anxious to help resolve this conflict so that if it is resources or economic interest that is driving them, they can deal with the legitimate owner of the resources in the Southern Cameroons, whoever that legitimate owner turns out to be?
Well, here's the deal again. If their world was absolutely peaceful and there were no other crises going on, then I'm sure that the entire world would focus on this. But given the fact that there are much more immediate crises going on, like I said, you know, if you divide the day into 24 hours, during the 24 hours, you can only focus on so many things. So, you know, your issue is complicated, it's historic, it is being voiced by many different voices with many different points of view. So all the decision makers here is a cacophony. And the easiest thing to do when you hear a cacophony is to just turn it off. And unfortunately, that is what has been happening. You know, guys, we can have this idealized world of peace and justice and right, and everything is being done according the way it should be. And then we have the world we have to live in. And I fear that a lot of people in your community deal with this imaginary world where, you know, UN Resolution 1608 is somehow magically going to be implemented by this imaginary international community. And, you know, folks, I hate to say this, and I know I make people angry, but the sooner the entire community recognizes the world for what it is and deal in that world, the sooner you can make your cause go forward.
Thank you. Mr. Lehman says, Mr. Ambassador, do you think presenting this war in the Cameroons as a conflict of state succession to the international community will make the right to self-determination an immediate solution that can present a permanent, peaceful solution to the conflict?
Again, theoretically, that would be a good approach, but we're not dealing with theory. The most practical way to present it is to present it the way that the South Sudan situation was presented, where you have a minority, which basically is 20% of the population, whose rights have been removed by the government of the majority, and that they are suffering because of that. They're suffering culturally, they're suffering linguistically, they're suffering historically. People are dying, they don't have the rights guaranteed by, you know, basic fundamental United Nations historical documents. That is what, you know, I suspect that a lobbyist, those are the kind of points that they would be taking forward to say that this minority deserves to be sampled as to what are their preferences going forward.
Yes, I mean, and tied to the point you just made, the question from Ama Anastas says, the suffering is with the people in ground zero, that is in Southern Cameroons, while the division is with the people in the diaspora. Is there a way we could make this, that is the suffering of the people in ground zero, the important aspect, and ignore the division in the diaspora? Absolutely.
I mean, you know, the poor people who are being abused, the women who are being raped, the people who are being killed, does it really matter to those poor victims? You know, whether the philosophers and the academicians are discussing, you know, the disagreement between a referendum and a plebiscite. I mean, the whole idea is to end the suffering as quickly as possible, not to fire a 25-page, you know, academic studies at each other.
Talking about that, I suppose, let me debate. What are your thoughts about the relevance of that debate, referendum versus plebiscite?
I think it's ridiculous. I think it's absolutely ridiculous, because the key is, again, for the people on the ground to be given a choice. You know, I don't care what you call it. You know, you can call it tic-tac-toe for all I care. It's the substance that matters. And again, people who get into the, you know, about what's the correct terminology, it's absolutely useless. And it's unconscionable for every life that is lost while these kind of arguments go on.
That's absolutely right. From a question from Bobby, now that Cameroon may know the outcome of a referendum and Cameroon refuse it, I'm not sure, what will be the outcome? So I suppose what will be the outcome if Cameroon refuses?
Yeah, see, that is the beauty of a UN-sponsored referendum, like there was in Sudan and South Sudan, or when there was in Eritrea, is that you do all of the hard work up front. That's why you need professional representatives to engage with the, with the US political system and the international community, so that the sides agree on the referendum and they agree on what's going to be on the referendum. And, it gets to the point where there is real pressure on the government in Yaoundé. Then they say, like what happened with Khartoum. There was so much pressure on the government in Khartoum that, they said enough is enough. We will let the people of South Sudan vote on this, and whatever happens, we'll do it. And I think in the South Sudan referendum, I think, what was it, 98% of the people voted for independence. And, and again, with Eritrea and Ethiopia, I think in Eritrea, 90-some% of the people voted for Eritrea to become an independent country. So, that's why it's important to put this kind of a cause in the hands of professionals who know what they're doing. I was an academician myself, so I have respect for academicians, but academic, firing off missives of, historical studies is not going to move the needle, no matter how good it makes the people feel who write the stuff.
Order, moderator, can you take the hands up before we go to questions?
We have a couple of hands up.
Yeah. And please, I would have preferred questions on the chat, but once we get up the questions on the chat, I'll come to hands because I'm being expeditious with time. So if you can put your question on the chat, we will go with that.
Mine is a remark, not a question. Mine is a remark.
Okay, I'll come to remarks at the end before the ambassador leaves. Let us deal with questions first. So talking about that, let us move on a little to the so what now. So we have an idea of what might be a rallying issue or a rallying point for Southern Cameroonians. What suggestion, without necessarily giving out something that may be too strategic to benefit Cameroon government, what suggestions would you make for the next step in building up this consensus such that it can now move the international community? It can move Washington, it can move London, it can move Munich.
Yeah, the thing is, when you get your message and it's a unified message and you agree on the most important aspects of the message, then you can start a campaign, a political campaign of selling the importance of that in the various capitals through what I said before, our professional representatives. Because it's only when the community has some point of unity that you can start pooling your resources instead of the various factions taking up the resources. I mean, I don't know how much lobbyists cost, but they cost a serious amount of money. And I have seen some of the other, causes going forward. I mean, one of my other passions is Somaliland. They have actually run their country, and it's a very successful country for several decades. They have representation in Washington, and they are making some headway in getting recognition. But it's a hard slog when you have people, powerful interests against you. And you have to honestly look around the world and say who your potential allies are and who your potential, adversaries are. You have to carefully analyze the geopolitical situation in the region. Where does Nigeria stand? Where does the African Union stand? Where are the points where you can gain sympathy? Because at the end of the day, if you focus on stopping the suffering, instead of who wants to be the Minister of Fisheries in the future state of Ambazonia, then you will have some sympathetic ears listening. Or, my gosh, people will fall out of their chairs asleep if you go in there, talk about the difference between a plebiscite and a referendum.
Yes. So we have a question, but before we do, I suppose while I read the question, we can go to Mr. Candida to make his comment briefly.
Ben,
and then,
Ben was up before.
Okay, Ben first, then Mr. Candida, then I'll go through this. This is a bit of a long question. I have to read it. So Ben, you have a couple of minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm asking my question from ground zero. Your Excellency, when I listen to you talk, you are telling us that the issue of referendum at this point is not of importance. So what do we need to do to make sure that the international community listens to us and to make sure that the Cameroon government stands in the position whereby they need to come on the table?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we mentioned that a little bit before. Okay, first, unity. You know, I'm not the one who's promoting a referendum. I'm using that as an example of something that the community can gather around. But once you have your unity, then you engage, you find your political advisors, and like I said, in your case, it's going to cost. That's why the community has to be able to support it. Then the political advisors make their pressure points, you know, whether, you know, in Berlin, in London, and you have to think seriously about Paris, the African Union, and in Washington. And then you get the international community on board to agree and say, okay, this is a great idea. And like I said, I don't give a flying flip whether you call it a plebiscite or a referendum, call it whatever. But then the international community agrees, and then it's taken, you know, to the United Nations, and you need to have the kind of pressure on your side so that, you know, the French do not veto it. So, you know, again, you study how the South Sudanese did it. You study how the Eritreans did it. Study how the Somalilanders are doing it, and follow their example.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Candida, a couple of minutes, then I'll go to Mr. Diman's question.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Mine is not a question, but a remark to our honorable ambassador. Ambassador Tibor Nash, on behalf of all Ambazonians, home and abroad, we thank you and appreciate your support for the liberation struggle. One of the few diplomats around the world that have been consistent in advising and educating us on the struggle. Your tolerance in dealing with us is so amazing. God has a way of rescuing the oppressed by sending people like you to light the candle, especially when the tunnel is dark. Your wisdom tailored tweet will be incorporated into our history books. In fact, you are going to be our honorary ambassador in the making as soon as we get the new nation ambassador in West Africa. Find a place in your heart to forgive the ignorant ones amongst us. Some of whom refuse to yield to reasoning. The eagles will follow your advice, and together the oppressed people of Ambazonia will be free. The chickens can remain in the cage, making academic and historical debates. We mean that collaboration of the willing, as exemplified by our brothers and sisters who met at the Houston Institute, 24th of April, 2023, is the way to go. God bless you, God protect you, God give you long life to be part of Ambazonian history and by extension, African history. Thank you. This is Candida.
Well, thank you very much for those wonderfully, you know, kind comments. But I do want to make a point. I don't believe anybody is ignorant, because when you're dealing with an issue of such emotion and passion, when people believe a certain point of view, they're going to be passionate about it. So, you know, that's one of the reasons I keep saying that, unfortunately, the disunity and the passion involved behind that is one thing that I think people are just going to have to find what they can agree on so that the passion can go in the right direction.
Okay, I will go through a couple of questions, then we'll go to some hands. Mr. Lehman asked, Mr. Ambassador, if Ambazonians present this conflict as a minority problem of marginalization or minority suffering, will the spatial status and upcoming regionalization proposed by the Cameroon government not be considered an adequate solution? Why will Ambazonians need a referendum if the minority problem is solved? we're classifying it as a minority disgruntlement rather than a conflict between two states be considered an acquiescence to our sovereignty claims.
Yeah, I don't think that that will be a problem, because I think it would be fairly easy to show the lack of sincerity on the part of the Cameroonian government. You know, they say the right things and they call them the right things, but when you look behind the door, there are no walls on the house. It's just the front. And, you know, that's the important thing, is to show substantively that the rights, the basic fundamental human rights of the people of Southern Cameroons and Amazonia would not be guaranteed or respected under that kind of a system. I mean, I don't think that the struggle would be happening if the government in Yaoundé had treated Southern Cameroons the way the Canadian government treats Quebec. You know, in many respects, Quebec has 20% of the population in Canada, but they drive a lot of the agendas. You never see a Canadian politician make a speech without using half of it in French and half of it in English. Have you ever heard any of the major principals in Yaoundé, including the president, make a full speech in English? Does the president even speak English? So, you know, I think that you would have a good cause to show.
Okay, one question, then we go to the hands up from Dr. Fontaine. Figuring out a strategy will be contingent on our ability to distinguish between collaboration and unity among Southern Cameroonian fractions. This is because some factions continue to reject unity in favor of collaboration. What are the implications?
I think that's not for an outsider to respond to. That has to be something from the community itself. I mean, look at the history of struggles and the internal dynamics and the dissensions without those struggles, and how they were able to get over that, even starting with the American Revolution. You know, half the population in America at the time probably wanted to continue living as a colony with Great Britain. So, you know, that is absolutely for the community and not a foreigner to talk about.
So we have Mr. Valentine, Fobe, and Dr. G in that order. Please just keep it less than a couple of minutes.
And hey, guys, remember, I have to go in 4 minutes.
So keep please 1 minute or less.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Herman. This is just an observation. And this question is addressed to Amazonians. We've invited this gentleman repeatedly, and he has appeared, guided us on many occasions. What are we Amazonians doing to listen to his advice? Do we? I suppose we have a homework to go back and organize our house, because the same questions keep coming up. Mr. Tibor, Nagy, what do we do? What are we doing in our own house to organize ourselves? He has spoken about multiple opinions, multiple groups. What are we doing with these groups?
Okay.
Thank you. I think that since that, I don't know, that was not for the ambassador, but I think Bandangam is here, and as our father in the house who has taken this mantle to lead the initiative to answer that question. So when the ambassador leaves, Bandangam will take the floor.
Along with Denise Atemking,
yes, let's go quickly.
One of our
2 minutes left, please. Mr. Mfo, and then Dr. G. 1 minute, please.
It's something really light.
Okay, if Mr. Mfo is not there, Dr. G, 1 minute, please.
No, Mfo is here. Thank you very much, my comrade brother. I just wanted to ask Professor Tibor Nagy on this situation. We know exactly, this question has been asked time and again. Cameroon is already having a relationship with the West in terms of resources. France is their father. Concerning this referendum, all we know is Cameroon is playing the strong man because he has this business contracts, and it's a matter of interest. We know America has interest with the BR government. That is not questionable. France is there, has interest with. Do you think France is going to accept this issue of the referendum because they know the answer, especially in the UN General Assembly, to veto it. Thank you. And Britain also. Thank you.
Well, very quickly, after this, I have to go. Luckily, the United States does not have very heavy commercial interests with Yaoundé. The most significant interests that the United States has with Yaoundé are security interests having to do with what's going on in the far north of Cameroon. And as far as other interests go, I mean, again, look at the situation with Sudan. A lot of people had economic interests in Sudan, but the international community put tremendous pressure on the Sudanese government because of the way they were treating the South Sudanese. You know, they implemented Sharia, they tried to force them to speak Arabic, you know, they did not let them follow their historical traditions. You know, does that sound familiar to you guys with your own situation? So again, I have to leave, but all I urge is, please think about unity and think about common points of pressure instead of organizing circular firing squads and going for purity. And please look at the real world and focus on how you can make effective changes in the real world instead of in this idealized world where, you know, UN resolutions from 1961 have some kind of a meaning. So listen, God bless each of you, because I know in your heart everybody wants to do the right thing, and God bless Ambazonia. Take care and good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you very much for all your help. Goodbye.